we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, 7 EST, November 4th, 2024, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. First Monday for the next 4 months where we are going to be in daylight savings time. I live in Arizona, which is the only state that handles it the right way, in which case we don't do it. So that means I did have to move it back an hour, but excited to see you all here. Really looking forward to talking these movies tonight. We are going to be reviewing Here and Anora. I said we jump right in. That being our first review of the night, that being Here, directed by Robert Zemeckis, iconic director of films such as Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, won the Oscar for Forrest Gump. Has had an incredibly prolific career, and he's back once again in the directing chair, making one of the more experimental films of 2024. This film, if I were to give the pitch, if you haven't seen the trailer, it is about a honestly just one spot in Earth. I know this is very confusing, but if you see the trailers, you know what I mean. It is about one spot in Earth, and you follow that spot in Earth from prehistoric time to modern day. The camera does not move. It's just on this one shot, and you see how many different people live their lives through that one spot, how many different people form families, build a house. We do eventually see a house being built there. We see we learn this house is in America. We see different figures in America going to that house. Eventually, in the 40s, let me pull up the last name of the family. The Young family purchases this house, and Tom Hanks, the eldest son of the Young family, ends up marrying Robin Wright's character, and they end up having a family. You're essentially just watching this just time go by as you just stay in this one particular spot. Very much an experiment. Robert Zemeckis is someone who, when he's good, he's one of the best of all time. I think Back to the Future is maybe the greatest blockbuster ever. I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I love Contact. I love Death Becomes Her. I love Castaway. But it can't be understated that since the 21st century, he has really struggled to capture that magic that he once had as a filmmaker. And I really do feel like that is because since 2004, when he made The Polar Express, he has just been so obsessed with different types of technology that he can showcase in films, whether with The Polar Express, it was the motion capture technology, which he used with Beowulf and A Christmas Carol. Flight, which I do think is a good movie. It's very much just, he really just made it just because he wanted to showcase that great plane crash. The Walk with Joseph Gordon-Levitt was about the guy, Philippe Petit, who tightroped across the Twin Towers. He really just made that because he just wanted to make that giant set piece. Welcome to Marwen, which I think is a terrible, terrible film he wanted to make because he wanted to make these like live action figurines move. It really does seem like he has moved away from these really human stories and has really just wanted to showcase his love of technology and just finding more unique ways to make films, which I do applaud. Like, I do like that he's kind of pushing the boundaries of what filmmaking can be. But as someone that loved those really great old Zemeckis movies, I do wish that we could get the Zemeckis of old. And unfortunately, I can say, while I had hopes for this movie, while I thought he could maybe capture the magic that he once had in the 80s and 90s, this is once again a movie where, as I was watching it, I realized he was much more interested in the idea of making a film where the camera doesn't move and you're just following one spot than he was about telling a story and showing how you can really make really interesting themes and ideas from that one core idea. I really do think the idea of having a stationary camera is a lot more interesting than it is effective. Like, I tell you, like, you're watching this movie that's almost 2 hours, and the camera doesn't move once, and you're just following it from one spot. We see these characters interact, but it's always in this just one room. We jump through different timelines. Like, that sounds super interesting, but on paper, when the plot lines just aren't that interesting, when the main family we're following, they're dealing with the exact same type of struggles that we've seen every single other family in all these other like schmaltzy Hallmark movies sort of deal with. You just end up walking away really disappointed for what could have been. This movie isn't told from like a completely linear perspective. You do start out in prehistoric times, but you are jumping all around. You see like I said, you see the early prehistoric times. You see how the native tribe that lived on the land before America came over, how they used this land. We eventually jump forward to the 18th century. Benjamin Franklin's illegitimate son is the one that actually builds the house there. And he sets the land. The house is actually built in 1900 by another person. And then once we get to the 40s with Paul Bettany, who plays a World War II veteran, we're essentially just following them. And the movie jumps around all the time. And I wasn't really that confused by the nonlinear storytelling. And that less has to do with the fact that that the movie is told in a really, really great way, and more just to the fact that aside from the young family, I didn't really care about any of the storylines that I was watching. I thought I could have cared about the colonial story. I thought I could have cared about the Native American story, but Zemeckis just didn't really seem that interested in delving into the lives of these characters, as he's more delving into the life of this one spot that we are watching. Without spoiling, the last shot of the movie is the entire screen goes black and you just see this one window of the house. And I think that's just sort of is a great metaphor to show what Zemeckis was more interested in this movie, of not telling this beautiful story about all of these families that come across this one room. He's just more focused on the one spot in the one room in general, which I get that. Like on paper, I'm saying that, and you're probably like, that kind of sounds interesting. It's really not. You're really just kind of watching a bland, very mediocre movie, and just the exact same type of story you would expect from Robert Zemeckis nowadays. Tom Hanks and Robin Wright do a decent job in the leads. Like Hanks and Wright obviously reuniting from Forrest Gump. Tom Hanks played Forrest Gump. Robin Wright played Jenny. It's really fun to see them act together again. There are certain scenes that they have that did feel a little bit heartwarming, and I will give the movie credit there. I don't think that was due to the writing. I really just do think that is just because Tom Hanks and Robin Wright are just such great actors that they can elevate the material, even if it is a little bit mediocre. Paul Bettany, I think, is really solid as Hanks' dad. They use a lot of makeup. Tom Hanks at one point is playing an 18-year-old. You're never convinced that you're watching an 18-year-old. You're just sort of going with it. And I don't think this movie was really committed to making you feel like Hanks and Robin Wright are playing these teenage characters. I think it's just more they're just using the actors because they do have the star power. So I'm not going to harp on at that point, but that was a little distracting. Alan Silvestri once again composed the score for this movie, like he has done for every single Robert Zemeckis movie since I believe Romancing the Stone, actually before Back to the Future. His score is good. It's always great to hear Alan Silvestri compose a really great score. The CGI in this movie is and this seems weird that I'm harping on the CGI when so much of the movie is just focused on this one shot. But man, when you see the dinosaurs in this movie and when you see like the fake hummingbird, it's so distracting when these things come up. And I'm watching this and I'm like, this is Robert Zemeckis. He has the money to invest in making this really great, all these creatures look realistic, and he just didn't really seem that committed to it. So that is what's so perplexing about Robert Zemeckis to me, is that he's so obsessed with the technology of filmmaking and just different ways to tell stories, but he can't like refine the really basic stuff of like, if you're going to CGI animals, you got to make them look a little bit more realistic. And I don't know. I was just a little perplexed by by Zemeckis' choice there. Yeah, I wish I had more to talk about with this movie, but it just really just comes down to telling a story where the camera doesn't move from one location. Just isn't that it? Okay, I'm actually going to take that back. This reminded me of another movie. Came out 7 years ago. It's called A Ghost Story, and in that movie, Casey Affleck plays a character who dies very early on in the movie. You are following him as a ghost. He doesn't have any words. You are watching just a like ghost-like blanket. You have the little eyes pop up, and he is just walking around his house that he's still allowed to live in. And we jump many years into the future as we see just how many people live in that house, what that house goes through. That is such a more effective movie than this was. I think it was because that movie was a lot less focused on the dialogue and a lot more focused on just like atmosphere and ethereal emotion that you're following. And this one just focusing on these human stories that just aren't that interesting. It just left me feeling a little cold by the end, and I just don't really think it was that effective of a film. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, 0 being absolutely awful, 10 being absolutely incredible, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. I don't think it was that great of a movie. Again, I think this was a really interesting idea that just didn't pan out that well. Aside from Hanks and Wright and Alan Silvestri's score, I think this is just another knock on Robert Zemeckis' very lackluster filmography this century, minus a few exceptions. Like I do like I really love Castaway. I enjoy Allied. I enjoy Flight. That's about it. This is not the worst Zemeckis has been. It's nowhere near as bad as Welcome to Marwen or the live-action Pinocchio he did a couple years back, but this really isn't anything special. This is definitely a movie you could skip. If the idea is just that insanely interesting to you, I'd say just wait for streaming. This is not a movie you have to go see in theaters, unfortunately. But I'm going to be moving on to, without giving away my feelings too quickly, a much better film, that being Anora. This is the latest film from Sean Baker. Sean Baker is someone who directed Tangerine. He directed The Florida Project back in 2017. Really excellent movie. He directed Red Rocket around 3 years back, a movie about just an absolute just monster of someone, but a really great movie. And this movie is about a sex worker played by Mikey Madison. Mikey Madison plays the title character of Anora. She is a stripper that also works as a sex worker. She is hired by a Russian client that comes in, and he hires her at the strip club to give him a private show. Eventually, he says, "Hey, can I hire you for more sex work?" They do that, and he eventually says, "Hey, would you be willing to come with me on a trip for a week?" During that trip, they end up getting married in Vegas, and then a lot of things starts happening afterwards. It turns out this guy named Vanya is a lot more powerful and a lot more important of a person than Anora may have thought to begin with. Okay, Sean Baker is someone I really love as a filmmaker. He's someone that Tangerine is a movie I really like. Florida Project, one of my favorite movies of that year. Red Rocket, one of my favorite movies of that year. I was really looking forward to this movie. I was really wanted to see where Sean Baker would go. It's the first movie he's ever written the screenplay for. He's really good at taking these groups of people that aren't really represented in like the most positive light and shining like a really human light on them. And I think this movie is a borderline masterpiece. Like I'll just come out and say it. This is one of, if not my favorite movies of the year. And I think this is maybe the perfect crescendo of Sean Baker's career so far. Like I said, he's so perfect at capturing these specific environments, whether it's the Florida Project, where he's capturing this really like rundown, beat up Florida motel, or Red Rocket, where you're following just this really like dirty Texas town. Anora is Pretty Woman themes there. I said no, absolutely. Like I think the best way to describe this movie, this is Pretty Woman crossed with Uncut Gems. Like that is the best comparison that I think I can make. If that sounds like a cool comparison to you, you are going to love this movie. Even if that doesn't, I couldn't help but recommend this movie enough. I'll start talking more about it. This movie does a really good job at showing like dingy and dirty New York in a really great way. Like you see the back alleys of these strip clubs, and which also really does a great job at like juxtaposing with like the really nice rich neighborhood of upstate New York when Anora goes to visit Vanya when he takes her to Las Vegas and they go through the strip and they go through all these hotels. Really does a great job of creating this juxtaposition with all of these settings, and I think Sean Baker once again shows his mastery of just capturing these different specific worlds in all of his films. Mikey Madison is an absolute star as the title character. This is one of those, like the last time I could remember just watching a role being made for a character and just saying like that is a movie star being born was earlier this year with Zendaya and Challengers. Like and while that movie, she was essentially splitting the screen time with Mike Weiss and Josh O'Connor. Mikey Madison essentially has all this movie to herself. From her first shot, when you're seeing her dance in the strip club, you are immediately seeing someone that is going to be working for years to come. And this is going to go down as one of the better performances of the decade. She is hilarious in this movie. When she makes you want to cry, she is really great at making you want to cry. You never quite know where the character lands on her love of Ivan, on her love of Vanka, of Vanya, sorry. Whether she is actually in love with this guy or whether she's just using him for money. When Vanya's family starts getting involved, when they start sending goons, she is really great at like portraying this like absolute just anger and like terror in what's happening in her life. Every humorous moment she nails really, really well. Towards the end of the movie where the character's just at her absolute lowest, she really makes you feel for this person who isn't like the best person in the world. Like she definitely plays this guy maybe like a little, but I think by the end of the movie you can't help but have sympathy for this person. And I think it's because Mikey Madison just completely plays this character in such a perfect way. I read that Sean Baker actually wrote the performance for her specifically. Mikey Madison is someone that I've enjoyed from what I've seen, but I've only seen like a little bit of her. She played one of the Manson killers in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She played one of the killers in Scream 5. But this is such like a great juicy part for her to just absolutely sink her teeth in. And I think she just absolutely kills it. She's going to be nominated for Best Actress this year. I think that will be very, very well deserved. If I'm being honest, this is maybe my favorite leading performance of the decade so far. Since 2020, I can't think of a single leading performance that I've loved as much as Mikey Madison in this movie. Even though the movie is pushing around 2 hours and 20 minutes, and even though many of the scenes go on for like a while because you have just these characters having like these really like human conversations, they don't really feel scripted, you just have these characters just ripping, the movie still just tends to just flow by. And I think that's just because Sean Baker does such a good job at not making his films feel like super plotty. They just feel like you're just watching these characters live their lives, especially in the first half of the movie. I'd say a lot more plot definitely comes into fray in the second half when Vanya's parents start getting involved, when they start sending their goons in order to track down Anora and track down Vanya in order to get this marriage annulled. But like through that first half of the movie where we're just watching Annie and Vanya interact with each other, when you're watching just Vanya just buy all this stuff for Anora, Sean Baker just does a really great job at pacing his movies well. And this, like I said, is 2 hours and 20 minutes, but it does not feel like that at all. And even when we hit the ending of the movie, where you might not expect it to end at this moment, by the end of the movie, I was like, I did not feel bored at all in that movie, and that just really, really flew by. Wouldn't have added anything, wouldn't have taken away anything. Really thought the pacing was really, really well done. This movie, I think I've hinted at it. It is an absolute masterclass in tone. There are certain scenes in this movie where I was dying laughing. There is specifically one scene in the middle where essentially Vanya's family finally starts to catch up to him, and Anora starts realizing how troublesome this guy is really going to be. And the second this happens, I think for just 20 whole minutes, I was dying of laughter because everything that could go wrong does go wrong. You see how over her head Anora really is. You see just how much of an idiot Vanya is. And you see how these goons, like, while they're good at their job, they're not the best at, like, they don't execute it in the cleanest way. And I think that was really, really funny. yeah, I think many humorous moments, but at the same time, the last like 20-30 minutes of this movie is an absolute gut punch. We see the consequences that these characters have had. We see how they build up and how they eventually spill over, and you can't help but feel a little bit of sympathy for them for everything they did, even though I guess they technically could have even though as you're watching the movie, you're like, well, you did get into this situation by your own accord. The movie does a great job at making you care for these characters enough that you can't help but feel sympathy for everyone, especially Anora in this movie. Sorry, I'm just speaking over my words a little. Many of the supporting performances in this movie are absolutely excellent. Mark Edelstein plays Vanya. The best way to describe this movie is take Timothée Chalamet's character in Lady Bird, but make him Russian. This guy is like the ultimate bro. He's like he always has these chains on. He has these big sunglasses. Always wearing like really stylish jackets. Always thinks he's like so special. But the second we meet this character, we hear like, yeah, I'm really rich because I just take my parents' money. So like you can't help but just laugh at how just like pathetic he is. And towards the second half of the movie, when a bunch of the movie is placed on, okay, we got to find this guy, and we see how he interacts now that his power is starting to be taken away. We really just start seeing how much of a loser he is. We see when Anora starts taking her power back, and when she starts getting more upset at him, you just can't help but hate this guy more and more. And I think Mark Edelstein brings a lot of humor to this. Karen Karagulian, who plays the main goon that is searching down for Vanya, Toros. He's really, really funny. He does a really great job of being like, I'm so tired. I've looked after this kid since he was 6 years old. I'm so sick of just cleaning up after everything, after every single mess that he makes. He has a lot of funny moments when we're first introduced to this character. He's at like this baptism, and we just see his phone go off. And like as he's like christening the kid, he just looks at his phone. He's like, can someone just hold this baby? I got to go take care of this. And immediately which is just such a perfect introduction to this character, because we learn like, yeah, he's going to do the job, but he's going to hate it, and he's just tired. And but he's being paid to do it, so he's going to be there. Really, really funny how that character is handled. But the best supporting performance of the movie is from Yuri Borisov, who plays Igor, one of the main goons that is hunting down Vanya. When this person first meets Anora, they get off on a really, really bad start. He essentially is just like sort of like holding her down. Anora's always like trying to run away from him, which gets a lot of humor. So Anora automatically hates this guy, and Yuri plays this part in such like a nonchalant way of like, look, I'm just doing my job. I totally get if you hate me. Like, I had to hold you down. You were going to run. I apologize. As the movie starts to go on, he begins to hate Vanya more and more because he sees how poorly he treats every single person around around each other. Towards the end of the movie, Igor and Anora have a really great heart-to-heart moment. And both Yuri and Mikey Madison play this part in such a great way. Mikey Madison is easily going to get nominated. I really hope Yuri Borisov is in the Oscar conversation as it goes forward later in the year. So yeah, that almost every single performance is excellent. The filmmaking alone, like Sean Baker this is easily the best directed movie from Sean Baker's perspective, from Sean Baker's point of view. I think the cinematography is excellent. It does a really great job at just making you feel uncomfortable and just cramped in how we go from location to location in New York throughout the night as we're trying to search for this guy for Vanya. It shoots Las Vegas in such a beautiful way. Like, it does a great job at like showing how you would expect that city to look like in a commercial, and how someone like Anora would view this city as like, this is like the place of opportunity. I'm finally winning. I'm finally getting this break of marrying this rich guy. I think it's really, really great there. The editing is excellent. Like, there are scenes where it will go from like really, really quick cuts to just stopping and just giving us really long takes, where we get to see like finally like the emotion like set into all these characters, and see how just then finally realize like how screwed their lives are, and from everything they've gotten themselves into. And I think that that is really, really well done. And I just want to talk about like just the ending of this movie without spoiling it. I've seen some people say like they weren't the biggest fan of how the movie concludes, mainly not because it's like bad, but because it ends in a really, really weird way. I thought it was heartbreaking. Like, I thought it was absolutely heartbreaking. I think the way how Sean Baker writes the character of Anora and her final decisions in the final scene is absolutely incredible, and it would make sense for what this character would do. Now, if I'm looking at it from a critic point of view, what I will say is, well, I think this movie does a really good job at destigmatizing the area of sex work and not portraying that in a negative light from how this movie portrays it, in which case she's someone that employs herself, so she's employing herself in a very healthy way. What I will say is I could see the argument being made that the final scene maybe goes back on that a little, but I didn't really feel like that way, and I understand that like when you have a flawed character like Anora, she would make these decisions towards the end, and I think it was just so effective. Just as I thought this entire movie of Anora was effective. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, you probably saw it coming when I said it's one of the best movies of the year. I'm giving it a 10. This is the second 10 out of 10 I've given this year. I think it's an absolutely incredible movie. I think Sean Baker has cemented himself as one of the best directors working today. Mikey Madison giving one of the best performances we've seen all decade. I laughed, I cried. This is everything I want movies to be and more. I could not recommend this movie enough. It does have a lot of nudity. It does have a lot of sex. If that is just something that really, really bothers you, I would have to say stay away from it. But if you can handle that, if you are someone that wants to watch powerful movies about flawed characters, I could not recommend this movie enough. And I'm saying it right now, this is my favorite movie of the year so far, with 2 months left to go. But thank you all for watching Cinemaster's reviews this week. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video store. It helps grow our channel a lot. Next week, I didn't look up what is coming out, and I will get back to you guys. But I'm definitely going to be reviewing movies. I'll definitely be back next week. Real quick, before we leave, I'm just going to leave you guys all with a little message. Tomorrow is Election Day. Go out and vote. It's an important decision. It is an important duty as an American citizen to go do that. I'm talking to the American audience right now. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I don't think that is my decision. I also only work for the video store. I'm pretty sure they would get mad at me. But I don't think they'll get mad at me for saying you should go vote, because your voice matters regardless of who you pick tomorrow. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to be back next week. And remember, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Yeah, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.